Hello there, welcome to a short little video, hopefully, which wasn't originally part of my plan on what I wanted to get out, especially BFDI wise, but I thought it would be a fun little video to make and just get my opinion out there. But I wanted to rank all of the 11 remaining contestants in TPOT as of the 23rd episode, and deciding who I think should win TPOT in my own opinion, and this is purely based on my personal beliefs and just nothing else outside of it. And I will also have no spoilers in this video for TPOT 24-25, which are the meetup episodes coming out soon. And I also wanted to give my whole opinion on this final 11, and kind of just TPOT as a whole as of right now. And I'm gonna go into that like right now, because I thought it would be better to get it out of the way and then go into the ranking, especially with what I have to say, but I don't really like this final 11, or where TPOT is currently heading. And I say that because of a few reasons. First off, a decent chunk of this cast, of this final 11, are all like Season 1 veterans. Like, we have these four in the front, we got Pencil, Tennis Ball, Golf Ball, and Pen, who have all competed in the first season, which shouldn't be a crime within itself, but this is supposed to be the quote-unquote underdog season, at least that's what I seen throw around online, or at least in my sort of interpretation, this is the season dedicated to those characters who Jack and Jillify decided that shouldn't be in the top 14 of BFB. Well, technically 15 if you count Profiley, but while it's not a crime in itself, as I said, it is kind of annoying just seeing these four get some sort of like priority, whether it's not from the voters or the writers, over characters that probably should have gotten it instead. Not to mention there's also Book and Donut, and which just kind of shows the sort of lopsidedness towards pre-BFB era of BFDI, which is kind of annoying considering that at least half the show originally was dedicated to all these new recommended characters that didn't get to compete before in like BFB, and now we're in TPOT, we're almost done with TPOT, and this is condensed down to 4 of these characters, plus Taggy, who debuted in TPOT 1. And that's just kind of annoying. And not to mention, in complete honesty, which I'm trying to talk about with, like, TPOT itself doesn't give enough focus to this final 11, or to the contestants in general. It feels like the show is taking away from the contestants and, like, the actual competition of the show, and focusing it all on the numbers. Like, 2, 1, 3... all of these characters and their conflicts are like the main stage of the show now. And all the contestants have become sort of like this just add-on, which really is annoying, especially from a show where you're supposed to vote to save the contestants. I feel like you should be putting a bit more priority on the contestants, especially for this sort of, oh, well, you want to see these characters more and you don't want us to write them off sort of way. And then they just proceed to just write them off. I still think they've done Robot Flower dirty. How dare you? And again, it's just really annoying that like the number conflict is really the only thing that's going on. And it only affects the prize and fairly little the contestants. But regardless, I still think this final 11 is salvageable to get like a decent final 2 out there, if the voters aren't stupid like Fire Jr. said. Anyways, I have 4 tiers here. We have the good choices, the favorable picks in my eyes, and alright choices, which are like characters that I'm just like fine with winning, I'm not super crazy about, but like I think it could work under some circumstances. And then we have characters that I'm not super okay with winning, like they're just alright, I don't really get the hype behind them, or so to speak. And then we got characters who I think should be banned from the finale. And let's not dilly-dally and start with the character who most certainly should not be in the finale. Pencil. First off, Pencil was written to return into the show. She was voted to come back in, yes, but the show has literally stated that she was not supposed to come back, and that was like part of the plot with 1, which I will admit, I do really like the Pencil arc as on its own, and I think it's the one contestant arc that they actually give a decent amount of focus to, or actually any sort of focus to. As I said, they always talk about the numbers, and while, yeah, I assume that Pencil gets all this focus because she is tied to 1. She's kind of parallels 1. That's kind of her whole bit. She's like the 1 foil. Regardless, she is the only character that I feel like gets this sort of screen time, and yet I don't want her to win because, first off, that's already way too much screen time for her. And second off, if she wins, that would just completely undermine the entire story that she's getting. I feel like it would be a lot more satisfying if she's eliminated, like, if she's the next to go. Either that's through an actual vote, or they straight up like disqualify her for the time travel shenanigans, or they just like, I don't know, make her quit. I don't know. Either of those could be like the most viable options in my eyes. But regardless, she should not be in the finale. In fact, I don't really think she should be like getting this far, especially when Lai just got out, which is just kind of really annoying because she was the one that got the most votes in the TPOT 12 vote. Anyways, moving on to our next pick, who is also banned from the finale, Tennis Ball. Now, people who follow me on Twitter and other places, like if you subscribe to me here, you'll know that I love Tennis Ball. He is my favorite contestant in the entire show. That being said, he already got super far in BFDIA, and I do not want like any more repeat finalists anytime soon. And yes, I count the bronze medalist of BFDIA a finalist. It just makes more sense to me. Also, he's just not very interesting in TPOT outside of like the first episode and the most recent episode where he's actually doing stuff. 90% of the time he's either there to be Golf Ball's henchman or just there. He doesn't contribute too much to the story, and without him, I feel like that would be completely fine, and I do not want him to win. There's also a lot of accusations that, like, people bought votes for him. I have not seen any, like, concrete evidence that this is the case, but if that's the case, then he should just be disqualified too. I don't want a rigged winner. People are already saying that Flower was rigged. Anywho, let's move on, because I have not much to say else outside of that. Let's talk about Golf Ball. And Golf Ball is actually the first character that I'm going to put in a pretty good choice. She has a major focus throughout all of TPOT. She got a small arc during the first half of the team swap, which eventually kind of got like put in with the pencil stuff. Moving on, I still think she has a lot of potential to dive into. She has always been one of my favorite characters, and I do think that she's just also just really funny. I don't know. She says some stuff that just really makes me laugh, and I think that is more than enough to like get her pretty far. And now we're going on to Pen. And I'll be kind of honest here, I am very conflicted about Pen, and I'm just going to say that I'm already putting him in like the not super amazing choices, which I know is probably like the biggest hot take of this video. Now, I think he had a solid arc during the team swap, and it was one that really paralleled with Pencil, and it also really worked both in his favor and in Pencil's, but I feel like that arc came at the cost of a lot of other contestants, especially when it comes to like screen time stuff. Even to the point where I think it's a bit more like overbearing for him specifically than it is for Pencil, which is saying a lot because Pencil already takes a lot of screen time. But when Pen got his arc, it came at the cost of getting Needle out, who I think should have gotten a bit more focus in Teapot. It came at the cost of giving Lai time the spotlight so she could quote-unquote cheerlead Pen on. And it kind of got messed up with Bottle a bit. Everyone's always voting to save Pen. He's always in like the top 3 on his team whenever he's up for elimination, and that's just a bit annoying. Not to mention, he feels like a very basic and generic winner to me, because he's always been like this quote-unquote main character throughout the entire show, and I know I like kind of propped up Pencil and Golf Ball for doing that, but it's kind of different for Pen because I feel like Golf Ball has a lot of stuff going on and just is a constant presence, and it's kind of like a bit more antagonistic of a role. Pen is just kind of dumbed down a bit. Like, he isn't as super like underhanded as he was in the original season of BFDI. He's kind of just there. He's kind of the good guy, and everyone else is like, he's the good guy. He gets a bit anxious when his friends get out, and like I don't really think that would be like the best winner choice in my eyes, and I feel like that's kind of why I don't really like characters like Fiery or Fern, because I don't think they're like super awesome winner choices. They're just alright characters that can get far, just not win, please. Anyways, now that we finished the first generation, I want to move on to the second with Book, and it's pretty obvious. She's banned from the finale. Pretty much the same reasons as Tennis Ball. She won BFDIA and hasn't done much of note in Teapot, especially since episode 17. She got a decent focus like during episodes, let's see, 10 through 17, but after that, I feel like she's kind of fallen off. I feel like she should have gotten out instead of Ice Cube, which would have been a lot more interesting, and you know, Ice Cube getting far for once after getting the short end of the stick in BFDIA. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. But I do like her friendship with Taggy. I think that's a pretty fun thing that I'll go into later. Anyways, moving on to Donut. Now, originally I actually had Donut pretty high. I think he's an alright choice. He's entertaining in pre-split, he's relevant in Teapot, and he's pretty involved in the plot lines while not being a major focus. That being said, I feel like the same issues I have with Pen also apply to him, where he has a major focus, but his true personality rarely gets to shine. Like, I feel like he's kind of also devolved into this sort of perfect candidate to win. Like, he doesn't have too many issues that don't come to light, and I feel like his true personality has taken a big step back. Even though he was toned down in, like, BFB and also kind of modern BFDIA, I feel like he isn't, like, as much as a jerk that he should be, which is just kind of disappointing in my eyes. So I'm just gonna put him in an alright choice. I'm putting him above Penn because I think I would rather see, you know, this first boot of BFDIA win a show. I think that would be fun to see, even though that is kind of just retreading Flower a bit. But yeah, not much else to say about Donut. I understand why people put him up high. I just think that he isn't like the best choice. And let's move on to Fanny, which I am now realizing while looking at the little notes I have, I did not write about Fanny at all, which is kind of says a lot about how the show is kind of treating her nowadays, which is funny because where I'm going to place her is probably going to surprise a few people, but I do think that she's a pretty good choice to win, and I know that's probably a bit surprising. Like, if I literally forgot to write about her, why is she a good choice? And I think that she's a pretty good choice because, I don't know, she's funny. She had a pretty big focus during the early days of TPOT, during that sort of quote-unquote dark ages of TPOT, I've seen people call it, which I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I didn't like TPOT 3 through 8 that much either, although I wouldn't say it's the dark ages. We're not in post-split, guys. But I don't know, I like Fanny. I think she's pretty funny. I'm really glad that she has a big role in the one plot, even though that she's kind of taken a back seat so that Black Hole and the others can get some focus. But if she plays like a bigger role, like these up-and-coming episodes, then I think that would make her a really good choice to win. Honestly, I think every contestant should have like a big focus in these episodes, not just, oh, like so-and-so, because it kind of makes me sound a bit hypocritical, like, oh, I want Golf Ball and Fanny to get far because they're always there and they're really funny, but I don't want Donut or Penn to go because they're always there and they're not super funny. But again, this is kind of just my personal thing. I just find more enjoyment with a character like Fanny than a character like Donut. Same thing with Golf Ball and Penn. I just feel like there's a lot more of a flawed winner approach to them than Penn and Donut have. Speaking of flawed contestants, let's talk about Black Hole. Black Hole is kind of just alright in my eyes. He's pretty engrossed in the storylines, and his arc is pretty strong throughout the entire season, although I do think he became pretty stale when it came to the team swap, and he just kind of was there to just stand around and deal with the crack in the sky, or whatever it was, the rift in the sky. Like, he isn't a horrible character or anything. I don't hate him. I think he's pretty chill, but I do think that he should get a bit more depth and priority to it. Again, I do think that he is more nuanced of a winner choice than, like, I guess Penn and all the band people, but not like someone super crazy like I think Golf Ball and Fanny are. So I'm also going to put him in alright choices. Above Donut, even though these really aren't ranked. If that was the case, then pencil there, book there. Doesn't really matter. But, you know, I think it would just, I don't know what to say. So what is he, like the third place on this? I guess, if we're really ranking these in order, which I'm not. I'm just throwing these into the tiers that they are. I think he'd be an alright choice to win, although I do think it would be kind of like this sort of, oh well, of course a character with all this power wins more power. That's really fun, guys. Congratulations, we picked such a great winner, and it's all thanks to you. Anyways, let's talk about Grassy now. I am very conflicted on Grassy. We see a lot of Grassy, and he always gets a lot of votes. Like, he's almost always the first contestant safe. And we see a lot of his struggles going through the season. And I think that's cool to see, to like very much have a character that's constantly struggling, because he is the quote-unquote baby of the cast. That being said, I do think that he is, I keep saying kind of generic of a winner choice, I think he just isn't that super enticing of a character to me. I think he's just kind of the baby and that's it. Like, that was his whole dynamic with Snowball. That was his whole bit with TPOT 19. Like, yeah, he's the baby and it's sad, but I don't really want the baby character to win. I just don't think that's like the best option. And even though that he gets all these likes, all this favoritism, I still don't think that would be like super interesting of a winner. Especially when like the quote-unquote other baby characters like Rocky and Fiery Jr. have a lot more edge to them. At the very least, Fiery Jr. does. Rocky gets some moments to shine here and there, but I don't think Grassy has that, outside of, like, TPOT 19, I guess. So I'm just going to put him in not super amazing. And now into Marker, which I was originally kind of conflicted, but I do see the vision. I think he's pretty funny. I think he has some fun dynamics with others. And while I do hope he does get a lot more involved, I can see why he's pretty popular, and I do enjoy him. A bit less than the others, but him having the power would be kind of funny. So you know what? I'm gonna put him in good choice. good choices. Yeah, that's kind of a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting to put him that high, but I don't know. I think he would be a pretty fun winner. If they do a lot more with him coming up, I do think that he could end up being like probably the best choice. And finally, we have our quote-unquote newbie, Taggy, our favorite Taggy. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised they lasted farther than Winner. I'm surprised they lasted farther than Lie, too. But, like, it is kind of interesting seeing how far they've got. They've kind of taken a back seat for a while, but it did have some payoff as them being the newbie. Like, that's their personality, so to speak, or at least their role. And it really contributed to their dynamics. It really made a fun dynamic with Book during, like, the later stages of the first team phase and the team swap era. And I did like their conversation with 2. I actually did prefer it over some of the other 2 moments we've gotten in the season. But I do wish that their actual personality shone a bit more, because they definitely seem to be sort of like this, you know, like with Cloudy and Yellowface, they're like the collectors, they're the sellers. Taggy is kind of like that. Taggy's like a traitor? I think that's what they did in like episode 7, and I thought that was fun. But I do wish that happened a bit more, because it only really comes up in some moments, and other times Taggy's just kind of along for the ride. Kind of the perfect embodiment of this season, isn't it? Taggy is just along for the ride while everyone else is doing just random stuff. We got like 2 and 1's drama, and then we got Taggy there like going like, yeah, you get him, go get him. Or whatever. I'm just spitballing here. But yeah, I do want their personality to shine a bit more so that can justify a win. They're definitely a lot more than what a lot of people say, I think. A lot of people say that like Taggy's just Naily 2.0, which I honestly think is a bit of a disservice to Taggy. I don't really like Naily too much. I think Naily's just a pretty bland and generic character that doesn't do much. And Taggy also isn't a character that does much or shines too much. I do feel like there's a bit more of a nuance them specifically compared to Naily, who kind of was there for a bunch of episodes and then was kind of a jerk in like BFB 12 onwards and then got eliminated. With all that in mind, I'm going to put Price Tag in all right choices. I don't really have too much else to say about that. This is our current lineup of all these contestants, who I think is a good choice, who I think is alright, who I'm not super crazy about, and who just get out like right now. Just have the one arc end with all these contestants up for elimination. But I did want to talk about the potential returning choices for a bit, who I think should rejoin the game. I have 3 characters in mind. Actually, let's boost it up to 4, because I just thought of another one. First off is pretty obvious, it's Puffball. TPOT 22 showed us her potential while picking up her storyline. She's a pretty popular choice, and I do think that she was robbed in both BFDI and TPOT, and you know, would be fun to see her get to emerge once. Up next is Robot Flower, who I previously stated I think was very much robbed and should have stayed in TPOT 15 and should have had a stronger reaction to Basketball's disappearance in episode 22 and 23. Regardless, I do want her to get farther and be more loved, as that was kind of the whole point of her storyline, and it is kind of funny that we just completely fumbled it for her. Up next, we got Cake. He had a pretty major role in TPOT 22, played a decent part in TPOT 23, and it would be pretty nice to see him, you know, get a bit more time in the spotlight. I do think his elimination was kind of unfortunate, although it kind of had to be done, whether or not. I don't really think there was that many other better choices on his team, although it's just sad that the 2 characters that I associate with just not the most got out first. But I do think that with him distancing himself from Loser, that would make like a pretty strong case on what his storyline could be going forward if he rejoins. And finally, we have Foldy, because it would be really funny. Just imagine Foldy rejoining. We all love Foldy in TPOT 22. So let's keep that up. Keep that momentum up. Bring back Foldy 2026. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. I know that I kind of started off with a bit of a negative note, but I do have faith in the BFDI team that they could, like, you know, salvage the remainder of the season, make it as enticing, especially when like the one story arc ends and we finally get back to like the contestants being the major focus. Unless they like, I don't know, make the negative numbers the main villain next, which I'm like, come on. Enough with the numbers, bring back the contestants. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. And hopefully my next video will actually be the Algebrailian video that I teased a while ago. Sorry the audio quality is a bit different. I am on my computer instead of recording on my phone for once, which is, if this is better, please tell me. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the flip side.